One thing we were all clear on is that beyond the SLT, we needed a broader set of leaders who were bought into modeling the mission and building the culture we needed. For as long as I could remember, each year the top 150 or so executives would gather for an annual retreat. We left our offices to drive to a remote, mountainous area about 2 hours from our headquarters. There we would take up residence at a quiet, comfortable hotel where we would work to get on the same page strategically. This retreat has always been a good idea. Each team shares product plans and performs demos of their latest technology breakthroughs long before the world will experience them. And everyone appreciates having time to reconnect and see their colleagues over meals by the fire. But one aspect of the offsite really bugged me. Here we were with all this talent, all this bandwidth, and all this IQ in one place just talking at each other in the deep woods. And frankly, it seemed like most of the talking was about poking holes in each other's ideas. Enough. I figured it was time to hit refresh and experiment. That year, we did several things to symbolize change and to get the top leaders fully on board. I needed them to buy into where we were going, and I needed them to help get us there. The first change to the retreat was inviting founders of companies we had acquired in the year prior. These new Microsoft leaders were mission-oriented, innovative, born in the mobile-first and cloud-first world. I knew we could learn from their fresh, outside perspective. The only problem was that most of these leaders did not officially qualify to go to executive retreats, given the person's level in the organization. To make matters worse, neither did the manager or even their manager's manager. Remember, the retreat had been only for the most senior leaders. Inviting them was not one of my more popular decisions. But they showed up bright-eyed, completely ignorant of the history they were breaking. They asked questions. They shared their own journeys. They pushed us to be better. Another decision, not universally loved, was scheduling customer visits during the retreat. There was more than a little eye-rolling and groaning. Why do we have to meet with customers during retreat? We already meet with them in the normal course of business. Do you think we don't know what our customers really need? But we pushed through the cynicism and met in a conference room the first morning of the retreat. We split up into a dozen or so teams and boarded vans. Each van had a nervous account manager hosting the trip, along with a cross-section of the company's most senior researchers, engineers, sales, marketing, finance, HR, and operations people, all new to working with one another. The vans headed off in different directions across the Puget Sound region to meet with our customers, schools, universities, large enterprises, non-profits, startups, hospitals, small businesses, and the like. The executives listened. They learned together. They made new connections with one another. They put down those proverbial guns and discovered new ways Microsoft could fulfill its mission in the world. They experienced the power of having a diverse, cross-company team solving customers' problems together. Perhaps the most important thing we did during the experimental retreat was engage the leaders in more open and honest dialogue about our cultural evolution. Kathleen Hogan, our Chief People Officer and my partner in this endeavor, knew we needed to get this group's feedback and buy-in. So after a long day of visiting customers in the Seattle area and driving back into the mountains, people were again divided into 17 random groups of about 10 each. They were then pointed to dinner tables with the assignment to share their own account of where the company's culture stood and their ideas on how to evolve it. Some of us guessed this exercise would be futile, a cute nod to leader engagement. We figured these leaders would be tired, they'd be persnickety, they'd want to congregate back with their own friends. They'd say culture was my job or HR's job. We were dead wrong. Discussions went long into the evening as the broader executive team gained a common understanding of what others experienced in leading their own teams and brainstormed ways to create the culture we all aspired to have. The next morning, Kathleen and each table leader joined me for breakfast to report about what they learned and to share big ideas born from the previous night's brainstorms. They were passionate, eager to help, and the energy was infectious. In the end, I left the retreat inspired by those ideas, But more importantly, I left inspired by the deep engagement and commitment I saw from these leaders. We knew we needed to build on this momentum, so we enrolled each of the table discussion leaders in a sort of culture cabinet, a group of trusted advisors and senior leaders who were committed to helping shape and lead the culture change in every part of our company. The change was coming from within. By the summer of 2015, our leadership team was really coming together and the company was beginning to see momentum. Windows 10, which would be our most ambitious version ever, was nearing launch. The launch of Surface Pro 3 would prove that consumers and businesses alike wanted a tablet that could replace their laptop. We delivered Office for all devices, including the iPhone, and our cloud-based O365 added nearly 10 million subscribers. Azure, Microsoft's cloud platform that competes with Amazon, was growing rapidly. In the months that followed my email to all employees, our leadership team had refined the thinking in that memo and had decided we would affirmatively change the company's mission statement. Our transformation was underway, though we still had a long way to go. Shortly after the retreat, I was scheduled to head for a week-long tour across Asia, starting with an important conference in China. Every weekend, I would call my mum and talk to her. Since I was traveling that Saturday, I decided to call her before getting on the plane. It was Ugadi, New Year's Day for our region of India. I had not realized that, so my mum reminded me and wished me a happy New Year. It was a brief call since I was late to get to the airport, and we talked briefly about the week and all that was going on. We ended the call as usual with her asking me if I was happy with what I was doing and me assuring her that I was. What a blessing, because 2 hours before landing, I received a worrisome email from Anu back home asking if I had landed. I sensed something was wrong, and after some back and forth, learned that my mother had unexpectedly passed away. Deeply shaken, I cancelled my trip and hurried on to Hyderabad. Over time, I would realize that while the death of a parent is painful, my mum is always there in my consciousness. She will always be there. Her calm and mindfulness continue to shape my relationships with people and the world around me to this day. During that season, I reflected on her role in my life and her constant push to find a sense of contentment and meaning in all I did. This idea was sitting with me through the spring as I prepared to share our new mission and culture with employees globally. That July, I boarded another plane for Orlando, Florida, with a renewed sense of optimism. Every year in July, some 15,000 customer-facing Microsoft employees gather for a global summit to hear the latest strategies and initiatives and to see demos of new tech products in development. The gathering would be my opportunity to update employees on our progress and enroll them in the changes underway. With the energy of thousands of colleagues pulsing through the auditorium, I stood backstage rehearsing how I would present our new mission and the imperative to transform our culture. Microsoft people are infamous for presenting a ton of PowerPoint slides when they speak, but I don't like to rely very much on slides or notes. So I was free to just channel what I was thinking and feeling, to let it flow. A computer on every desk and in every home, which Bill and Paul had introduced 40 years earlier as the company's mission, was actually more of a goal, an inspiring one for its era. The more I thought about it, the more I questioned what it was that had motivated us to create personal computers in the first place. What was the spirit behind the first line of code ever written for the basic interpreter on that primitive computer, the Altair? It was to empower people. And that was still what motivated all of our efforts, to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. We are in the empowerment business, I said as I took the stage, and not just to empower startups and tech-savvy users on the American West Coast, but everyone on the planet. Helping people and their organizations achieve more is our sweet spot. That's what informs our decisions and inspires our passion. It's also what makes us different from other companies. We make things that help other people make things and make things happen. That's the essence of our mission. But our employees and our business partners, ranging from Accenture to Best Buy, Hewlett-Packard to Dell, wanted to hear more. They wanted to know our business priorities. To deliver on this promise of empowerment, I said that we must galvanize all of our resources around 3 interconnected ambitions. First, we must reinvent productivity and business processes. We needed to evolve beyond simply building individual productivity tools and start designing an intelligent fabric for computing based on 4 principles: collaboration, mobility, intelligence, and trust. People still do important work as individuals, but collaboration is the new norm, so we build our tools to empower teams. We would aspire to help everyone be productive no matter where they are, regardless of the device they use. Data, apps, and settings, all content, needed to roam across computing experiences. Intelligence is an amazing force multiplier. To be successful amid the explosion of data, people need analytics, services, and agents that use intelligence to help them manage their scarcest resource, time. Finally, trust is the foundation upon which everything we do is built. That's why we've invested heavily in security and compliance that set the standard for enterprises. Second, we will build the intelligent cloud platform, an ambition closely linked with the first ambition. Every organization today needs new cloud-based infrastructure and applications that can convert vast amounts of data into predictive and analytical power through the use of advanced analytics, machine learning, and AI. From an infrastructure perspective, we would come to deliver on the promise of a global, hyperscale cloud platform with dozens of unique data centers around the world. We would, over the years, invest billions of dollars each year to build out more and more infrastructure so that our customers could scale their solutions without worrying about their cloud platform's capacity or the complex demands of transparency, reliability, security, privacy, and compliance. Our cloud would be open and offer choice so that we could support a wide range of application platforms and developer tools. We would build our server products to become the edge of our cloud, supporting true hybrid computing. And it would not be just infrastructure driving this growth, but also the intelligence we would infuse into applications. We would offer cognitive services for vision, speech, text, recommendations, and face and emotion detection. Developers would simply use APIs within their applications to augment users' experiences by enabling solutions to see, hear, speak, and interpret the world around them. Our intelligent cloud would democratize these capabilities for startups, small businesses, and enterprises alike. Third, we needed to move people from needing Windows to choosing Windows to loving Windows by creating more personal computing. Just as we would transform business and society through cloud computing, we also needed to revolutionize the workplace to help organizations and people be more productive. We launched Windows 10 with a new concept, to enable Windows as a service, continuously delivering value across all of our products. We engineered Windows 10 to enable innovative and more natural ways to interact and engage with devices. Ask a question with your voice, draw with the flick of a pen, and secure your most important things with a smile or a touch. These experiences place users at the center so they can move seamlessly across all devices, from the PC, Xbox, phones, and Surface Hub to Microsoft HoloLens and Windows Mixed Reality. We needed employees and partners on board for the transformation ahead, and we needed Wall Street to be with us as well. Amy Hood, our CFO, understood the culture change we needed to navigate. She also became the crucial partner I needed for precise attention to quantitative detail across the business. Her job is where the rubber meets the road. Ahead of my first financial analyst meeting, Amy helped to translate the mission and ambitions into language and goals investors needed to hear. She helped, for example, shape the goal to build a $20 billion cloud business, something investors grabbed onto and tracked quarter after quarter. It took us from a defensive frame amidst falling PC and phone share to an offensive mindset. We went from deflection to ownership of our future. Rediscovering the soul of Microsoft, redefining our mission, and outlining the business ambitions that would help investors and customers grow our company, these had been my priorities with the first inkling that I would become CEO. Getting our strategy right had preoccupied me from the beginning, but as management guru Peter Drucker once said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. As I concluded my talk that morning in Orlando, I focused on what would be our grandest endeavor, the highest hurdle, transforming the Microsoft culture. It's surprising when an arena jammed to the rafters with 15,000 people falls silent. It's also unsettling when nothing can be seen because of the blinding stage lights. That's how I felt as I stood on stage in Orlando. I could feel a small lump grow in my throat. I was about to launch into a topic that was at once crucial for Microsoft to get right, but also deeply personal for me. I'm going to close out by talking about our culture. To me, it is everything, I said. Bill and Steve had made this annual address many times to employees over the years. Bill often looked off into the future, predicting tech trends and how Microsoft would lead. Steve rallied the troops, whipping everyone into a frenzy of excitement. I had used the first part of my speech to proclaim a new mission, one rooted in rediscovering the soul of our company. I had outlined a series of new business ambitions, but as I had foreshadowed in that Thanksgiving memo to the board of directors, real change depended on culture change. Culture can be a vague and amorphous term. In his perceptive book, Culture, the literary theorist Terry Eagleton wrote that the idea of culture is multifaceted, a kind of social unconscious. With razor precision, he separates culture into 4 different meanings, but the most relevant for an organization is the values, customs, beliefs, and symbolic practices that men and women live and breathe each day. Culture is made up of acts that become habitual and accrue to something coherent and meaningful. Eagleton, who lives in Ireland, notes that a mailbox in his country is evidence of civilization, but the fact they are all painted green is evidence of culture. I think of culture as a complex system made up of individual mindsets, the mindsets of those in front of me. Culture is how an organization thinks and acts, but individuals shape it. In my own life, it's the language, routines, and mindset of my parents back in India and my immediate family in Seattle that helped form me and still guide me to this day. It's that diverse collection of classmates back in Hyderabad who shared a learning mindset that would propel them on to leadership in government, business, sports, and entertainment. In all of these experiences, I've been encouraged to follow my curiosity and to push the limits of my own capabilities. And now I was beginning to see how this approach would be critical to Microsoft as it confronted the burden of its past success. Earlier in the year, Anu had handed me a copy of Dr. Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Dr. Dweck's research is about overcoming failures by believing you can. The view you adopt for yourself profoundly affects the way you lead your life. She divides the world between learners and non-learners, demonstrating that a fixed mindset will limit you and a growth mindset can move you forward. The hand you were dealt is just the starting point. Passion, toil, and training can help you to soar. She even writes persuasively about what she calls the CEO disease, an affliction of business leaders who fail to have a growth mindset. My wife wasn't thinking of my success when she gave me Dr. Dweck's book. She was thinking of the success of one of our daughters who has learning differences. Her diagnosis took us on a journey of discovery to help her. First was the internal journey, concern for her, but also the need to educate ourselves. Next came action. We found a school in Vancouver, Canada, that specializes in learning differences like hers. We spent 5 years of our lives splitting time and family between Vancouver and Seattle in order to augment her regular schooling while keeping Zane's care consistent in Seattle. All of this meant separation at many levels: husband and wife, father and daughters, mother and son. We were maintaining 2 lives in 2 countries. Anu drove thousands of miles between Seattle and Vancouver in rain, snow, and darkness, and so did I on alternate weekends for 5 years. It was a trying time, but Anu and the girls made some exceptional friends in Canada. As a family, We learned together that these predicaments were universal. Families from California, Australia, Palestine, and New Zealand converged on the Vancouver school with issues and challenges. I discovered that recognition of these universal predicaments leads to universal empathy, empathy for and among children, adults, parents, and teachers. Empathy, we learned, was indivisible and was a universal value. And we learned that empathy is essential to deal with problems everywhere, whether at Microsoft or at home, here in the United States or globally. That is also a mindset, a culture. As I continued my speech at the Global Sales Conference, the empathy I felt for my kids and the empathy I felt for the people listening in that audience were on my mind and in my emotions. We can have all the bold ambitions, we can have all the bold goals, we can aspire to our new mission, but it's only going to happen if we live our culture, if we teach our culture. And to me, that model of culture is not a static thing. It is about a dynamic learning culture. In fact, the phrase we use to describe our emerging culture is growth mindset, because it's about every individual, every one of us having that attitude, that mindset of being able to overcome any constraint, stand up to any challenge, making it possible for us to grow and thereby for the company to grow. I told my colleagues that I was not talking bottom line growth. I was talking about our individual growth. We will grow as a company if everyone, individually, grows in their roles and in their lives. My wife Anu and I had been blessed with wonderful children, and we've had to learn their special needs. That has changed everything for us. It's taken me on this journey of developing more empathy for others, and what gives me deep meaning is that ability to take new ideas and empathy for people, to connect the two and have great impact. That's what gives me the greatest satisfaction. It's why I work for Microsoft, and that's what I aspire for each one of you to do as you work here. Our culture needed to be about realizing our personal passions and using Microsoft as a platform to pursue that passion. For me, my greatest satisfaction has come from my passion to see technology become more accessible for people with disabilities and to help improve their lives in a myriad of ways. Just as my predecessor Steve Ballmer had done at these annual gatherings, I closed my speech with a call to action, but one with a very different mood and purpose. I had essentially asked employees to identify their innermost passions and to connect them in some way to our new mission and culture. In so doing, we would transform our company and change the world. When you're CEO, these goals can be easy to imagine, but when an employee's aperture is smaller, a marketer in Malaysia or technical support in Texas, such a mission can seem distant and unattainable. So the challenge I'd set forth in my speech might be a daunting one. I wondered whether I'd connected with the audience or left them baffled and untouched. Feeling my emotions beginning to overcome me, I skipped my last slide and quickly exited the stage. Jill pointed at the doorway to the auditorium, not my private green room. Watch with them. As a video started presenting not just the year's progress, but the expansive, mission-driven opportunity ahead, I slipped back into the auditorium through a side entrance. No one could see me in the darkened auditorium. Every eye was glued to the screen, but I was watching them, gauging the emotion in the room. Everyone was locked in, and some were softly wiping away tears. I knew then that we were on to something. Chapter 4. A Cultural Renaissance. From Know-It-Alls to Learn-It-Alls. A few days later, I was in Nanyuki, Kenya, standing inside a solar-powered shipping container that doubles as an internet cafe. One of our partners, Mawingu, Swahili for Cloud Networks, provides these rural communities with low-cost internet services, which has opened up access to knowledge for school kids and parents alike. In fact, in just one short year, educational test scores have dramatically increased. Inside the cafe, I stopped to chat with Chris Baraka, who uses the connectivity here to make a living as a writer and teacher. I also observed farmers pausing from their outdoor work to check crop prices. With only a dozen people in attendance, one would never know that I was celebrating the global launch of Windows 10, a Microsoft product at the core of our strategy. 2 decades earlier, the launch of Windows 95, with its pricey theme song, Start Me Up by the Rolling Stones, midnight retail parties, and media hysteria, had helped create a phenomenon of bigger and bigger software launches. Competitors tried to outdo and outlavish each other's launch events in hopes of sparking customer impulses to purchase. But that was then, and this is now. A refreshed product launch strategy, one that reflected the times and our new mission and culture, was needed. Initially, our communications chief, Frank Shaw, had presented a first-class launch plan, complete with visual extravaganzas like setting ablaze the Sydney Opera House with Windows-branded colourful lights. He felt the product needed these kinds of inspiring and hopefully media attention getting images in Paris, New York, Tokyo, and elsewhere in order to generate the news coverage we had come to expect. But the approach didn't feel right. I felt that this was one of those moments to show a different Microsoft. We were struggling with what to do, and I decided to take a brief break from the meeting to get coffee. During that break, a side conversation among some of the team members rose above the chatter. We should launch Windows 10 in Kenya. Kenya is a country where we have customers, partners, and employees. It's a nation with great promise, one that with digital transformation could leapfrog over others by getting infrastructure and skills in place. The launch of Windows 10 wasn't about one product, it was about our mission. And if we're going to seek to empower every person on the planet, why not go to the other side of the planet and make that real? I walked down the hall to Frank's office. Let's take a chance. I knew that we had built a low-cost, high-speed internet connectivity solution that leverages an innovative technology called TV white space, the unused broadband spectrum that exists in between television channels, to connect rural, poor areas like Nanyuki, Kenya, to the web. We could show off not just Windows 10, but also its relevance to anyone and everyone, no matter their geography or socio-economic status. Frank thought about it another minute and agreed. What better way to demonstrate our new mission and emerging culture than to be in Eastern Africa, a region that exemplifies both the challenges and the opportunities for technology to transform and create economic growth. We might not get all of the TV cameras we used to get, but would be demonstrating our desire to understand every customer's context, including that of farmers in a remote African village, for whom technology tools can mean the difference between abject poverty and hope. By embracing this new cultural mindset, we'd be able to start listening, learning more, and talking less. So, what did this growth mindset reveal? One of the lessons we took back is that it's too simplistic to call a country like Kenya a developing economy or the United States a developed one. Both countries have educated, tech-savvy customers capable of using our most sophisticated products, and both countries have potential customers with little or no skills. Sure, there are higher concentrations of one or the other in each country, but it's a false distinction simply to think of countries as either developed or developing. The Windows 10 launch in Kenya struck a far more global tone for the company, and it also taught us valuable lessons. I like to think that the C in CEO stands for culture. The CEO is the curator of an organization's culture. As I had told employees in Orlando, anything is possible for a company when its culture is about listening, learning, and harnessing individual passions and talents to the company's mission. Creating that kind of culture is my chief job as CEO. And so, whether it was through public events like the launch of Windows 10, or through speeches, emails, tweets, internal posts, or monthly employee Q&A sessions, I plan to use every opportunity at my disposal to encourage our team to live this culture of dynamic learning. Of course, exhortations from the CEO are only a fraction of what it takes to create real cultural change, especially in a huge, very successful organization like Microsoft. An organizational culture is not something that can simply unfreeze, change, and then refreeze in an ideal way. It takes deliberate work, and it takes some specific ideas about what the culture should become. It also requires dramatic, concrete actions that seize the attention of team members and push them out of their familiar comfort zones. Our culture had been rigid. Each employee had to prove to everyone that he or she knew it all and was the smartest person in the room. Accountability, delivering on time, and hitting numbers trumped everything. Meetings were formal. Everything had to be planned in perfect detail before the meeting, and it was hard to do a skip-level meeting. If a senior leader wanted to tap the energy and creativity of someone lower down in the organization, she or he needed to invite that person's boss, and so on. Hierarchy and pecking order had taken control, and spontaneity and creativity had suffered as a result. The culture change I wanted was actually rooted in the Microsoft I originally joined. It was centered on exercising a growth mindset every day in 3 distinct ways. First, we have to obsess about our customers. At the core of our business must be the curiosity and desire to meet a customer's unarticulated and unmet needs with great technology. There is no way to do that unless we absorb with deeper insight and empathy what they need. To me, this was not something abstract, but rather something we all get to practice each day. When we talk to customers, we need to listen. It's not an idle exercise. It is about being able to predict things that customers will love. That's growth mindset. We learn about our customers and their businesses with a beginner's mind, and then bring them solutions that meet their needs. We need to be insatiable in our desire to learn from the outside and bring that learning into Microsoft while still innovating to surprise and delight our users. Second, we are at our best when we actively seek diversity and inclusion. If we're going to serve the planet as our mission states, we need to reflect the planet. The diversity of our workforce must continue to improve, and we need to include a wide range of opinions and perspectives in our thinking and decision-making. In every meeting, don't just listen. Make it possible for others to speak so that everyone's ideas come through. Inclusiveness will help us become open to learning about our own biases and changing our behaviors so we can tap into the collective power of everyone in the company. We need not just value differences, but also actively seek them out, invite them in. And as a result, our ideas will be better, our products will be better, and our customers will be better served. Finally, we are one company, one Microsoft, not a confederation of fiefdoms. Innovation and competition don't respect our silos, our org boundaries, so we have to learn to transcend those barriers. We are a family of individuals united by a single, shared mission. It is not about doing what's comfortable within our own organization. It's about getting outside that comfort zone, reaching out to do things that are most important for customers. For some companies, this comes more naturally. For example, those tech companies born with an open source mentality get it. One group may create code and intellectual property, but it's open and available for inspection and improvement from other groups inside and outside the company. I tell my colleagues they get to own a customer scenario, not the code. Our code may need to be tailored one way for a small business and another way for a public sector customer. It's our ability to work together that makes our dreams believable and ultimately achievable. We must learn to build on the ideas of others and collaborate across boundaries to bring the best of Microsoft to our customers as one Microsoft. When we exercise a growth mindset by being customer-obsessed, diverse, and inclusive and act as one Microsoft, that's when we live our mission and truly make a difference in the world. Taken together, these concepts embody the growth and culture I set out to inculcate at Microsoft. I talked about these ideas every chance I got, and I looked for opportunities to change our practices and behaviors to make the growth mindset vivid and real. Part of the culture change was to give people the breathing room, the space to bring their own voices and experiences to the conversation. The last thing I wanted was for employees to think of culture as Satya's thing. I wanted them to see it as their thing, as Microsoft's thing. To encourage the shift toward a learning culture, we created an annual hackathon during our one-week celebration, a time for everyone to be on campus simultaneously, to make connections, learn about what others are doing, find inspiration, and collaborate. Playing off the notion of growth mindset, the hack made perfect sense. Within the subculture of computer programmers, hacking is a time-honored tradition of working around limitations and creatively solving a difficult problem or opportunity. In that first year, more than 12,000 employees from 83 countries entered more than 3,000 hacks, ranging from ending sexism in video games to making computing more accessible to people with disabilities to improving industrial supply chain operations. One team was made up of people from multiple Microsoft groups across the company. They were interested in delivering better learning outcomes for kids with dyslexia. The Microsoft Hackathon became an avenue for people with depth and passion, people spanning product groups like OneNote and Windows, as well as research to come together and start a movement. They began by researching the science surrounding dyslexia and decided to go after a problem called visual crowding. Led by one of our software engineers, the team found ways to allow more space in between letters to make words more readable. But they didn't stop there. They also found ways to create a more immersive reading function with the ability to highlight text and have it read out loud, further increasing reading comprehension. They built a tool to break words into syllables and to highlight the verb and subordinate clause. They got feedback from students and teachers. In fact, one teacher wrote to tell us about the gains she had seen in her classroom, including from a boy with dyslexia who could only read 6 words per minute. Even when he did make a fluency gain, he couldn't sustain it. When he started using the tools our team built, she saw an immediate change. He was more willing to attempt assignments and his reading fluency skyrocketed. He went from reading only 6 words per minute to 27 words per minute in a matter of weeks. Another student improved so much he was moved to a higher level reading class. Today, the functionality that began as a hackathon project is now built into some of our most important products, including Word, Outlook, and the Edge browser. Now the annual Growth Hack has become a Microsoft tradition. Every year, employees, engineers, marketers, all professions prepare in their home countries for the one-week Growth Hack, like students preparing for a science fair, working in teams to hack problems they feel passionate about, and then developing presentations designed to win votes from their colleagues. Gathered in tents named Hacknado and Codapalooza, they consume thousands of pounds of donuts, chicken, baby carrots, energy bars, coffee, and the occasional beer to fuel their creativity. Programmers and analysts suddenly transform into carnival barkers, selling their ideas to anyone who will listen. Reactions range from polite questions to vigorous debate and challenges. In the end, votes sent from smartphones are tallied, projects evaluated, winners celebrated. A few projects even receive funding as new business efforts. Because I've made culture change at Microsoft such a high priority, people often ask how it's going. Well, I suppose my response is very Eastern. We're making great progress, but we should never be done. It's not a program with a start and end date. It's a way of being. Frankly, I am wired that way. When I learn about a shortcoming, it's a thrilling moment. The person who points it out has given me the gift of insight. It's about questioning ourselves each day. Where are all the places today that I had a fixed mindset? Where did I have a growth mindset? As CEO, I'm not exempt from having to ask myself these questions. Each of my business decisions can be scrutinized in terms of whether or not it has helped Microsoft shift toward the growth mindset we aspire to. Fixed mindset decisions are ones that reinforce the tendency to continue doing what we've always done. Traditionally, when we launched a new version of Windows, existing Windows users would pay us to upgrade. Terry Myerson, the executive in charge of our Windows and Devices group, had the growth mindset to shift for a time to a free consumer upgrade and forgo that revenue. In just a little over a year, it had become the most popular Windows upgrade ever, with hundreds of millions of users and still rising. We wanted customers to make that shift to loving Windows and to have the most personal and secure devices. Upon reflection, we learned a lot from Nokia. Even though it resulted in a painful write-down of the assets, acquiring the Finnish smartphone company led to numeric growth in terms of people and revenue, but ultimately we failed to break through in the highly competitive mobile phone business. Importantly, though, we learned a lot about what it means to design, build, and manufacture hardware. Our acquisition of Sweden-based Mojang and its video game Minecraft also represented a growth mindset because it created new energy and engagement for people on our mobile and cloud technologies, and it would open new opportunities in the education software space. The story of how the Minecraft acquisition happened illustrates some of the key qualities of a growth mindset, including the readiness to empower and learn from individuals who possess insights and passion that the rest of the organization needs to learn from. In this case, the individual was Phil Spencer, who heads Xbox. Phil understood that we needed to be the most attractive platform in the world for gamers, and he knew Minecraft had a dedicated and gigantic community of players who invented and built new worlds in this virtual, Lego-like video game. It's the rare video game that is invited into the classroom, and Minecraft is not just invited, but desired. Teachers love the way it encourages building, collaboration, and exploration. It's a 3D sandbox of sorts. If the classroom curriculum calls for building a river ecosystem with marshes, Minecraft can do that. If the river needs to flow, the Minecraft logic function can make that happen. It teaches digital citizenship because it's multiplayer. 12 students in a classroom can be told to go build a house, and within minutes they form teams and get to work, a model of the workplace of the future. Phil and his team built a great relationship with the Swedish game studio and managed to expand the Minecraft franchise to multiple devices including mobile and console. Early in Microsoft's relationship with Mojang before I was CEO, Phil presented an opportunity to purchase Minecraft, but Phil's boss at the time chose not to move forward. For some, such a visible, high-level rejection could have been withering, but Phil didn't give up. He knew that this beloved game belonged in a place where it could continue to scale up and prosper. He also knew that for Microsoft, bringing Minecraft into our ecosystem could lead to deeper engagement with the next generation of gamers. He knew our cloud could help it scale to reach every corner of the globe. Phil maintained a great relationship with Mojang, continuing to build trust, and one day, Phil's team got a text that the company was for sale again. They could have gone to any of our competitors to strike a deal, but they came back to us. Phil had recently become the head of Xbox, and I was new in my role as CEO. He brought the deal to me for reconsideration. I felt we could bring the inherent strengths of Microsoft to the product while preserving the integrity and creativity of the small indie group that invented it. We pulled the trigger on a $2.5 billion acquisition. Today, Minecraft is one of the best-selling games of all time on the PC, Xbox, and mobile. It has tremendous and lasting gamer engagement. Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, who were still on the board when the deal was presented, later laughed and said they had initially scratched their heads, failing to understand the wisdom of the move. Now we all get it. That's a growth mindset, and it highlights individual empowerment, what one person or one team can do against the odds. Even though I'm ambivalent about questions from outsiders about how the culture change is going, it's easy to see there is a tangible shift happening inside Microsoft. If you want to understand the culture inside a software company, show up at a meeting that includes engineers from different parts of the company. These are very smart people who are passionate about building great products. But are they plugged into what customers need and want? Do they include diverse opinions and capabilities when writing code? And do they act like they're on the same team, even if they work in different groups? Answers to questions like these serve as a great barometer for the culture we need, demonstrating a growth mindset. Customer-centric, diverse, and inclusive. One company. I remember a gathering in 2012 of top engineers from across Microsoft. It was one of a series of WIPs, short for Windows High-Powered Summits, envisioned as opportunities to improve products and solve problems that rely on collaboration across codebases. There was a high degree of ownership and a lot of pride. But to my dismay, the meeting deteriorated into a gripe session. One developer argued that he had fixed something in the Windows codebase that would help with a problem customers had discovered in an application that ran on Windows. Even though he had fixed it, the Windows developers were not accepting or checking in his new code. The discussion quickly devolved into argument and then name-calling. This was not the culture we're looking for. When I attended another WIPS a few years later, I heard a very different conversation. A developer announced that he had found a means for capturing or taking a screenshot of a moving image, a big improvement over our existing snipping tool, which was capable only of capturing a static image. A small piece of code that makes a big difference to a designer or editor. As in 2012 though, his fix had not yet been integrated into the Windows code. With a growth mindset, yet is an important clarification. Terry Myerson, the head of Windows, jumped into the conversation before the arguing and finger-pointing could begin. Send the fix again, and we'll take care of it. Even back in 2012, the energy for culture change had been there, but we needed to create a conduit for change. We had to break down the dam and allow change to flow. Now that has begun to happen. The key to the culture change was individual empowerment. We sometimes underestimate what we each can do to make things happen and overestimate what others need to do for us. We had to get out of the mode of thinking in which we assume that others have more power over us than we do. I became irritated once during an employee Q&A when someone asked me, "Why can't I print a document from my mobile phone?" I politely told him, "Make it happen. You have full authority." Another time, members of a chat group on Yammer, our corporate social media service for internal conversations, were complaining that people were leaving half-used milk cartons in the office refrigerator. Apparently, people would open a fresh 8-ounce container of milk, pour some in their coffee or tea, and then leave it out on the counter thinking others would finish it. But no one wants to use a personal milk container opened by somebody else that is beginning to sour. It blew up on Yammer, and I used one of my video messages to employees to have a good laugh at it, showcasing it as a humorous example of a fixed mindset. Culture change is hard. It can be painful. The fundamental source of resistance to change is fear of the unknown. Really big questions for which there are no certain answers can be scary. Consider one of the questions we ask ourselves continually. What is the computing platform of the future? Windows has been the PC platform of choice for decades, but now we're imagining a new era. The cloud and its edge with multi-sensory and multi-device experiences will enable new computers and new computing that is sensitive to human presence and responsive to individual preferences. We're hard at work building the ultimate computing experience, blending mixed reality, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing. Which of these will dominate the computing world of 2050, or will some new breakthrough emerge that is currently unimagined? Anyone who says they can accurately predict the future trajectory of tech is not to be trusted. However, a growth mindset enables you to better anticipate and react to uncertainties. Fear of the unknown can send you in a million directions, and sometimes it just dead ends with inertia. A leader has to have an idea what to do, to innovate in the face of fear and inertia. We need to be willing to lean into uncertainty, to take risks, and to move quickly when we make mistakes, recognizing failure happens along the way to mastery. Sometimes it feels like a bird learning to fly. You flap around for a while, and then you run around. Learning to fly is not pretty, but flying is. If you want to see what flapping around looks like, do a search for me and Karma. It's a fall day in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am attending the Grace Hopper celebration of women in computing, the world's largest gathering of women technologists. Diversity and inclusion is a bedrock strategy in building the culture we need and want, but as a company and as an industry, we've come up far too short. According to one report, women in the United States held 57% of professional occupations in the 2015 workforce, but only 25% of professional computing occupations. That's a real problem, and one that will only get worse with inaction since the number of computer-related jobs is only increasing. As the leader of a company, a husband, and the father of 2 young women, I see this failure to attract and retain women in computing as bad business, and it's wrong, which makes what I said that day in Phoenix all the more perplexing, not to mention embarrassing. Early in my appearance, there were loud cheers when I said we cannot settle for supply-side excuses. The real issue is how to get more women inside the organization. But near the end of my interview on stage, Dr. Maria Claw, a computer scientist, president of Harvey Mudd College and a former Microsoft board member, asked me what advice I had for women seeking a pay raise who are not comfortable asking. It's a great question, because we know women leave the industry when they're not properly recognized and rewarded. I only wish my answer had been great. It was not. I paused for a moment and remembered an early president of Microsoft who had told me once that human resource systems are long-term efficient but short-term inefficient. In other words, over time, you are rewarded and recognized for stellar work, but not always in real time. It's not really about asking for the raise, but knowing and having faith that the system will actually give you the right raises as you go along, I responded. And that might be one of the additional superpowers that women who don't ask for the raise have, because that's good karma. It'll come back. Long-term efficiency solves it. Dr. Claw, whom I respect enormously, kindly pushed back. This is one of the few things I disagree with you on, eliciting scattered applause from the audience. She used it as a teaching moment, directing her comments to the women in the audience, but clearly giving me a lesson I won't forget. She told the story of a time when she was asked how much pay would be sufficient, and she just said, whatever is fair. By not advocating for herself, she didn't get what was fair. Having learnt that lesson the hard way, she encouraged the audience to do their homework and to know what the proper salary is. Afterward, we hugged and left the stage to warm applause. But the damage was done. The criticism, deserved and biting, came swiftly through waves of social media and international radio, TV, and newspaper coverage. My chief of staff smugly read me a tweet capturing the moment. I hope Satya's comms person is a woman and is asking for a raise right now. Honestly, I left the conference inspired and energized, but I was mad at myself for blundering such an important chance to communicate my own commitment and Microsoft's to increasing the number of women we hire at every level of our industry. I was frustrated, but I also was determined to use the incident to demonstrate what a growth mindset looks like under pressure. A few hours later, I shot off an email to everyone in the company. I encouraged them to watch the video, and I was quick to point out that I had answered the question completely wrong. Without a doubt, I wholeheartedly support programs at Microsoft and in the industry that bring more women into technology and close the pay gap. I believe men and women should get equal pay for equal work. And when it comes to career advice on getting a raise when you think it's deserved, Maria's advice was the right advice. If you think you deserve a raise, you should just ask. A few days later, in my regular all-employee Q&A, I apologized and explained that I had received this advice from my mentors and had followed it. But this advice underestimated exclusion and bias, conscious and unconscious. Any advice that advocates passivity in the face of bias is wrong. Leaders need to act and shape the culture to root out biases and create an environment where everyone can effectively advocate for themselves. I had gone to Phoenix to learn, and I certainly did. But perhaps what taught me more was hearing stories from women I deeply respect about the bias they experienced earlier in their careers. Being told to smile more often, being blocked from joining the good old boys club, or facing the difficult trade-off between taking time off after having a baby or relentlessly climbing the career ladder. These powerful women who shared the hurt of their past experiences with me. During this time, I also found myself reflecting on the sacrifices my mother made for me and the challenging decision Anu had made to leave her promising career as an architect to care for Zayn and our 2 girls full-time for more than 2 decades. She made it possible for my career to advance at Microsoft. Since my remarks at Grace Hopper, Microsoft has made the commitment to drive real change in this area, linking executive compensation to diversity progress, investing in diversity programs, and sharing data publicly about pay equity for gender, racial, and ethnic minorities. In some ways, I'm glad I messed up in such a public forum because it helped me confront an unconscious bias I didn't know I had, and it helped me find a new sense of empathy for the great women in my life and at my company. This episode led me to reflect on my own experience as an immigrant. Hearing racial slurs toward Indians after moving to America never stung me. I just blew them off, an easy thing to do for a man raised in the majority and with privilege in India. Even when some people in positions of power have remarked that there are too many Asian CEOs in technology, I've ignored their ignorance. But as I grow older and watch a second generation of Indians, my kids and their friends, grow up as minorities in the United States, I cannot help but think about how our experiences differ. It infuriates me to think they will hear and grapple with racial slurs and ignorance. When I joined Microsoft, there was an undercurrent among the Indian engineers and programmers. We were aware that despite our contributions, there had yet to be one of us promoted to vice president, a rank that recognizes a leader as an officer of the company. We could get to a certain level, but not beyond. In fact, a senior executive, long since gone from the company, once told another Indian colleague that it was because of our accents, an idea as derogatory as it is outdated. It was the 1990s, and I was surprised to hear such bias within such a leading-edge company, especially one led by and founded by such open-minded leaders. Yet, when I looked around, sure enough, there were no Indian VPs, despite the well-known top performance of so many Indian engineers and managers. It was not until 2000 that myself and a few other Indians were promoted to the executive ranks. Whether cultural or attained wisdom, we felt that if we worked hard and kept our heads down, eventually good things would happen. One of my colleagues at the time, Sanjay Parthasarathi, became a big influence in my life and career. Although we had not known each other in India, Sanjay did play cricket under my own school captain for South Zone in under-19s. At Microsoft, we hit it off immediately. The combination of cricket and technology meant we never ran out of things to talk about. He told me that I must internalize for myself the belief that the sky is the limit. I must work hard, not to climb the ladder, but to do important work. With benefit of hindsight, I know now that anyone who feels like an outsider can be successful, but it requires both an enlightened management and a dedicated employee. A manager can be demanding, but must also have the empathy to figure out what will motivate employees. Likewise, an employee is right to put his or her head down and work hard, but they also have the right to expect a pathway to greater responsibility and recognition when they do. There must be balance. Because of my own experience and by learning from my colleagues, I get now how hard it is to join a company that doesn't look like you and to live in a community where most of your neighbors don't look like you. How do you identify role models you can fully relate to? How do you find mentors, coaches, and sponsors who can help you succeed without hiding your true self? At work, the tech industry, including Microsoft, is simply not as diverse as we must become. And outside work, minorities can also feel isolated. King County in Washington State, for example, which encompasses Redmond, Bellevue, and Seattle, is 70% white. African Americans comprise under 7%, and Latinos and Hispanics are nearly 10%. To help connect communities of people with like backgrounds and interests, there has been a long tradition inside the company of underrepresented groups organizing themselves into employee resource groups, such as Blacks at Microsoft, BAM, and Women at Microsoft. In all, there are 7 major ERGs and 40 more specific networks. They host online discussions, networking meetings, provide mentoring and professional development, community outreach, and connect people with a community inside and outside of work. Most importantly, they offer support. During 2016, as our African American colleagues struggled to come to terms with the tragic episodes of violence and innocent lives lost here in the United States, the BAM community was a source of connection and support. Following the Orlando nightclub massacre, the email discussion group for Gleam, the employee resource group for the LGBTQ community at Microsoft, provided a much-needed safe space for members to air fears and concerns. We all want a culture in which we're heard and supported. I said earlier that culture can be a vague, amorphous term. That's why we worked so carefully to define the culture we wanted, and it's why we measure everything. When it comes to humans, data is not perfect, but we can't monitor what we can't measure. So we routinely survey employees to take their pulse. After 3 years of intensive focus on culture building, we began to see some encouraging results. Employees told us they felt the company was heading in the right direction. They felt we were making the right choices for long-term success, and they saw different groups across the company working together more. This was exactly what we were hoping for. But we also saw some trends that were not as encouraging. When asked whether their vice president or group leader was prioritizing talent movement and development, the results were worse than they'd been before our culture building project began. Even the most optimistic workers will become discouraged if they are not being developed. I had set a clear mission and envisioned an empowering culture. Employees and senior leaders were on board, but we had a missing link: middle management. This was a bit disheartening, but in retrospect, it was completely understandable. Remember what I said about the aperture of those colleagues sitting in the darkened theater in Orlando? The opening through which a middle manager can see the organizational culture in the midst of his or her daily work is a crack when compared with the panoramic view a CEO enjoys. A Harvard Business Review survey found that senior leaders inside companies spend less than 10% of their time developing high-potential leaders. If even top executives cannot find the time to unlock employee potential, the growth path for most corporate team members looks pretty static. After reviewing the results, I seized on an upcoming meeting with about 150 of my top leaders to tell a few stories and to share my expectations with them. First off, I told them about an anonymous Microsoft manager who had come to me recently to share how much he loved the new growth mindset and how much he wanted to see more of it, pointing out, "Hey, Satya, I know these 5 people who don't have a growth mindset." The guy was just using growth mindset to find a new way to complain about others. That is not what we had in mind. I told these high-potential leaders that once you become a vice president, a partner in this endeavor, the whining is over. You can't say the coffee around here is bad, or there aren't enough good people, or I didn't get the bonus. To be a leader in this company, your job is to find the rose petals in a field of shit. Perhaps not my best line of poetry, but I wanted these people to stop seeing all the things that are hard and start seeing things that are great and helping others see them too. Constraints are real and will always be with us, but leaders are the champions of overcoming constraints. They make things happen. Every organization will say it differently, but for me, there are 3 expectations, 3 leadership principles for anyone leading others at Microsoft. The first is to bring clarity to those you work with. This is one of the foundational things leaders do every day, every minute. In order to bring clarity, you've got to synthesize the complex. Leaders take internal and external noise and synthesize a message from it, recognizing the true signal within a lot of noise. I don't want to hear that someone is the smartest person in the room. I want to hear them take their intelligence and use it to develop deep shared understanding within teams and define a course of action. Second, leaders generate energy not only on their own teams, but across the company. It's insufficient to focus exclusively on your own unit. Leaders need to inspire optimism, creativity, shared commitment, and growth through times good and bad. They create an environment where everyone can do his or her best work, and they build organizations and teams that are stronger tomorrow than today. Third, and finally, they find a way to deliver success, to make things happen. This means driving innovations that people love and are inspired to work on. Finding balance between long-term success and short-term wins, and being boundaryless and globally minded in seeking solutions. I love these 3 leadership principles. The heart of my message: changing the culture at Microsoft doesn't depend on me, or even on the handful of top leaders I work most closely with. It depends on everyone in the company, including our vast cadre of middle managers who must dedicate themselves to making everyone they work with better every day. I totally empathize with other leaders and see my job as helping them become even better. Leadership can be a lonely business. It can also be a noisy place. When a leader steps into the arena, especially in today's loud echo chamber of social media, he or she can be tempted to make decisions that will result in instant gratification. But we have to look beyond the temporal, discounting what someone will write in this moment's tweet or tomorrow's news. Reasoned judgment and inner conviction are what I expect from myself and from the leaders around me. Make the call, but don't expect consensus. Internally, we needed to have strong partnerships between leaders across the company among teams. But that same growth mindset was needed externally too. The competitive landscape had shifted seismically over the previous decade, and now new and surprising partnerships with friends and former enemies were needed. Chapter 5. Friends or frenemies. Build partnerships before you need them. There was an audible gasp and more than a smattering of chuckles in the auditorium when I reached into my suit jacket and pulled out an iPhone. No one in recent memory had seen a Microsoft CEO showing off an Apple product, especially not at a competitor's sales conference. This is a pretty unique iPhone, I told attendees at Salesforce's annual marketing event as the crowd quieted down. Salesforce both competes and partners with Microsoft in online services. I like to call it the iPhone Pro because it's got all the Microsoft software and applications on it. On the giant screen behind me, a close-up of the iPhone appeared. One by one, the app icons flashed into view. iPhone versions of Microsoft classics like Outlook, Skype, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, as well as newer mobile applications like Dynamics, OneNote, OneDrive, Sway, and Power BI. The crowd erupted in applause. Seeing me demo Microsoft software on an iPhone designed and built by Apple, one of our toughest, longest-standing competitors, was surprising and even refreshing. Microsoft versus Apple has been such a prominent and even contentious rivalry that people forget we've been building software for the Mac since 1982. Today, one of my top priorities is to make sure that our billion customers, no matter which phone or platform they choose to use, have their needs met so that we continue to grow. To do that, sometimes we have to bury the hatchet with old rivals, pursue surprising new partnerships, and revive long-standing relationships. Over the years, we've developed the maturity to become more obsessed with customer needs, thereby learning to coexist and compete. In the previous chapter, I wrote about the importance of building the right culture. Healthy partnerships, often difficult but always mutually beneficial, are the natural and much-needed product of the culture we're building. Steve Ballmer helped me deeply understand this with his 3 C's. Imagine a target with 3 concentric rings. The outer ring is concepts. Microsoft, Apple, or Amazon may have an exciting product idea, but is that enough? An organization may have a conceptual vision, a dream or imagination filled with new ideas and new approaches, but do they have what's in the second ring? Capabilities? Do they have the engineering and design skills required to actually build that concept alone? And finally, the bullseye is a culture that embraces new concepts and new capabilities and doesn't choke them out. That's what's needed in order to build and sustain innovation-producing and customer-pleasing products, smart partnerships. Concepts are better and capabilities more comprehensive when the culture invites partners to the table. 2 or more heads really are better than one. A few years back, Apple had a concept they felt would benefit from a renewed partnership with our capabilities and culture. Shortly after becoming CEO, I decided we needed to get Office everywhere, including iOS and Android. We had these versions in the works for some time, just waiting for the right moment to launch. I wanted unambiguously to declare, both internally and externally, that the strategy would be to center our innovation agenda around users' needs and not simply their device. We announced that we would bring Office to iOS in March 2014, 2 months into my new role. Soon, Apple sent a cryptic note to our Office team asking for an engineer to sign a non-disclosure agreement and come to Cupertino for a meeting. This is standard operating procedure in our secretive industry where intellectual property must be guarded. After a few meetings, it became clear that what Apple wanted was for Microsoft to work with them to optimize Office 365 for their new iPad Pro. Apple told us that they felt there was a new openness at Microsoft. They trusted us and wanted us to be part of their launch event. There was passionate debate internally about whether this was a good idea. At first, some product line leaders within Microsoft felt uneasy about partnering with their competitor. I definitely heard some resistance behind closed doors. One way to explain the logic is by turning to game theory, which uses mathematical models to explain cooperation and conflict. Partnering is too often seen as a zero-sum game. Whatever is gained by one participant is lost by another. I don't see it that way. When done right, partnering grows the pie for everyone. For customers, yes, but also for each of the partners. Ultimately, the consensus was that this partnership with Apple would help to ensure Office's value was available to everyone, and Apple was committed to making its iOS really show off the great things Office can do, which would further solidify Microsoft as the top developer for Apple. On launch day, Apple's Senior Vice President for Worldwide Marketing, Phil Schiller, teased the audience as he set up the next demo at the iPad Pro launch. We've been lucky to have some developers come in to work with us on professional productivity. Who knows productivity more than Microsoft? Nervous laughter filled the room. Yeah, these guys know productivity. Kirk Koenigsbauer, the head of Office marketing, took the stage to proclaim that more than ever, we are doing great work for iPad. But the publicity value of working with old rivals was far down on my list of motivations for pursuing them. Sure, people like to hear about competitors getting along, but forging great business partnerships is too difficult if PR is the sole purpose. For me, partnerships, particularly with competitors, have to be about strengthening a company's core businesses, which ultimately centers on creating additional value for the customer. For a platform company, that means doing new things with competitors that can accrue value back to one of the platforms. Sometimes that means working with old rivals, and sometimes it means forging surprising new partnerships. We work with Google, for example, to make it possible for Office to work on their Android platform. We partner with Facebook to make all of their applications work universally across Windows products, and likewise to help them make our Minecraft gaming applications work on their Oculus Rift, a virtual reality device that competes for attention with our own HoloLens. Similarly, we're working with Apple to enable customers to better manage their iPhones within an enterprise. And we're working with Red Hat, a Linux platform that competes with Windows, so that enterprises built on Red Hat can use our Azure cloud to scale up globally by taking advantage of investments we've made in local data centers around the world. Our partnership with Red Hat may not be as surprising to some as our work with Apple and Google, but when I stood on stage with a slide just over my shoulder proclaiming Microsoft loves Linux, one analyst concluded that hell must have frozen over. Partnerships like these can exist, at times uneasily, with competitors in specific product or service categories. We compete vigorously with Amazon in the cloud market. There's no ambiguity about that. But why can't Microsoft and Amazon partner in other areas? For example, Bing powers the search experience on Amazon Fire tablets. We have to face reality. When we have a great product like Bing, Office, or Cortana, but someone else has created a strong market position with their service or device, we can't just sit on the sidelines. We have to find smart ways to partner so that our products can become available on each other's popular platforms. In today's era of digital transformation, every organization and every industry are potential partners. Consider the taxi and entertainment industries. 90% of Uber riders wait less than 10 minutes for a driver, compared with 37% of taxi riders. Netflix costs its viewers 21 cents per hour of entertainment, compared with $1.61 per hour with old Blockbuster video rental model. These are some of the higher visibility examples of digital transformation, but it's happening in every industry. We estimate the value of these transformations over the coming decade to be about $2 trillion. Companies are focused on ensuring that they stay relevant and competitive by embracing this transformation, and we want Microsoft to be their partner. To do so, there are 4 initiatives every company must make a priority. The first is engaging their customer base by leveraging data to improve the customer experience. Second, they must empower their own employees by enabling greater and more mobile productivity and collaboration in the new digital world of work. Third, they must optimize operations, automating and simplifying business processes across sales, operations, and finance. Fourth, they must transform their products, services, and business models. Every company is becoming a digital company, and that process begins with infusing their products with intelligence. Experts estimate between 20 to 50 billion connected things will be in use by 2020, presenting a significant opportunity for companies to drive their own digital transformation. GE has become a full-blown digital company with its Predix platform, which partners with Microsoft to connect industrial equipment, analyze data from those machines, and deliver real-time insights. Toyota has a connected auto division that has transformed their cars and trucks into next-generation digital-era vehicles, moving digital platforms that enable cars to communicate with other cars and even with the city's infrastructure. Rolls-Royce is designing their engines as big data platforms to predict failures and minimize breakdowns. Our emphasis on strategic partnerships isn't really new. It's actually another example of how we have been rediscovering the soul of Microsoft. When I look at our founders, Paul Allen clearly saw the power of new computers, and Bill Gates saw the power of software. Together, they were able to create magic, and more importantly, democratize computing. I sometimes wonder if Bill and Paul had not succeeded with Microsoft, what would the world look like? Would we have independent hardware manufacturers, independent software vendors, system integrators, and others? Our original business model was built on an ecosystem of partners, independent software developers like Adobe and Autodesk, video game makers like EA Sports, hardware manufacturers like Dell, HP, and Lenovo, and retailers like Best Buy. I don't think Google would have existed but for the PC browser. Microsoft enabled Google to build a toolbar for our Internet Explorer, making Google services more visible and accessible. As a result of these and other partnerships, Microsoft and the PC helped nurture a host of billion-dollar companies, and Microsoft attracted millions of additional customers in the process.
This is the end of the disc. The audiobook continues on the next disc.